Hello, this is Short Stories, and I'm your host, Martin. I have prepared yet another short story based on a play by William Shakespeare. It's called The Comedy of Errors. It was probably written around the year 1600 and is one of Shakespeare's earliest plays. It is also his first comedy, and what a comedy it is. The Comedy of Errors tells the tale of two sets of identical twins who get separated in infancy. Most of the humor comes from the mistaken identities of the characters. It's a rather goofy play with a lot of puns and slapstick humor. The phrase, "a comedy of errors," is now used to describe any comedic story in which a series of honest mistakes leads to hilarious mishaps. You can definitely see the influence of this play on films like The Big Lebowski. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this zany story. Vocabulary: twin, twin. My twin and I live near our parents in Boston. Doppelganger, doppelganger. I saw your doppelganger at the mall today. He looked just like you. Short temper, short temper. Be careful around Frank. He has a short temper. Perplexed, perplexed. The movie Tenet left me feeling perplexed. Dolt, dolt. Bill failed at school because he is a dolt. Sort out, sort out. When the new president took office, he had to sort out the mess left by his predecessor. Can't make heads or tails. Can't make heads or tails. I can't make heads or tails of this book. Short on, short on. I'm short on cash, so could you lend me some money? The story. A long, long time ago, about the year 832 AD, a wealthy merchant named Aegeon lived in Syracuse, Sicily. On the same day that his wife gave birth to twin boys, his housemaid also gave birth to twin sons. Aegeon was elated. Not only did he have two sons, but also two servants to serve them. Unfortunately, Aegeon's happiness did not last long. Forced to flee Syracuse due to political unrest, Aegeon took his wife, sons, and servants on a ship. The ship was hit by a storm, and the family was separated. Aegeon made it back to Syracuse with one son and one servant. As for his wife, his other son, and the other servant, Aegeon had no idea what had happened to them. Aegeon had to raise his son and servant, whom he named Antipholus and Dromio, respectively, alone. On Antipholus's 20th birthday, Aegeon decided to tell his son about his missing brother. "I have heard," said Aegeon, "that there is a man in Ephesus who is exactly your age and looks exactly like you. I think it is your long-lost brother." Antipholus couldn't believe it. "I have a brother?" he exclaimed. He then vowed to go to Ephesus to find his brother. When Antipholus and Dromio arrived in Ephesus, they asked a local merchant for directions to the nearest inn. Through conversation, Antipholus learned that the merchants from Sicily were banned in Ephesus. "You'd better not tell people you're from Syracuse," explained the merchant. "In fact, a guy from Syracuse was arrested this morning. They'll probably execute him tomorrow." Antipholus thanked the merchant for his advice. Antipholus now turned to Dromio and gave him instructions. "The merchant said there is a place called the Centaur Inn. Go there with the baggage and get us a room. I'll stay here and make more inquiries. We'll meet up again at dinner time." Antipholus handed Dromio a bag of coins and left. "How will I ever find my brother?" thought Antipholus after Dromio was gone. "It's like two drops in the ocean trying to find each other. It's impossible." While Antipholus was concentrating on these melancholy thoughts, a man appeared at his side. "Excuse me, sir," said the man, "but your wife wants to know when you'll be home for dinner. She's worried the meat is getting cold." Antipholus turned and looked at the man. "Dromio, what are you doing here? I thought I sent you to the Centaur Inn," said the confused Antipholus. What Antipholus did not know was that he was not talking to his Dromio, but Dromio's twin brother. Just as Antipholus and Dromio had stayed together, so did their doppelgangers. Dromio's twin was just as confused as Antipholus. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "I'm not in the mood for your pranks now, Dromio," warned Antipholus angrily. "What did you do with the money I gave you?" Dromio's twin scratched his head and said, "What money, sir?" Antipholus had a rather short temper, and since he was raised by a merchant, he was especially anxious about money. "Why, you little—" growled Antipholus as he started beating Dromio's twin around the head and shoulders. The poor servant, fearing for his life, ran away. Antipholus then decided to go to the Centaur Inn himself to find out what had happened to his money. At the Centaur Inn, Antipholus met Dromio, his Dromio, and discovered that everything was as it should be. "Why did you tell me my wife wanted me home for dinner?" inquired Antipholus. "It wasn't a funny joke." Dromio scratched his chin and said, "I don't know what you're talking about. What joke?" Antipholus became angry once again and started beating poor Dromio on the head. "Ouch!" cried Dromio. "If you keep beating me like this, I'll soon be bald." Antipholus stopped and said, "You're already bald." Dromio smiled and said, "Well, then I guess I have nothing to worry about." Antipholus couldn't help but laugh at that. Just then, the wife of Antipholus's twin, Adriana, arrived. "There you are, husband," she said. "I've been looking all over for you." Now Antipholus was really perplexed. "Who are you?" he asked. "Don't you recognize your own wife?" Adriana replied. "Or have you been spending so much time with a mistress that you forgot what I looked like?" Antipholus wasn't sure what to make of the situation. It was all so confusing. "We'll discuss this after dinner. Come," demanded Adriana. Antipholus and Dromio shrugged their shoulders and decided to play along to see what would happen. They followed Adriana back to her house, where dinner was waiting. Antipholus and Adriana went upstairs to eat, leaving Dromio downstairs to guard the door. A few minutes later, Antipholus's twin arrived at the door with his friend Balthazar. He was surprised to find the door locked. He knocked, and Dromio answered. "Who's there?" The twin, who also had a short temper, turned red and said, "It's me, you dolt! Now open the door. I don't have time for your stupid games." Dromio scratched his chin and said, "How can it be you, sir, when you're already upstairs with the missus?" This really made the twin angry. "Who's up there with my wife? You open this door right now, or I'll bust it down myself." Balthazar, who knew his friend well, intervened to calm him down. "There must be some misunderstanding," he said. "Let's go to my friend's house for dinner. We'll get this all sorted out over a nice meal." After dinner was finished, Antipholus and Dromio met up in the back garden. "I had the weirdest experience of my life," recounted Antipholus. "First, this woman claimed to be my wife. Then, her hot sister scolded me for being a playboy. I can't make heads or tails of anything." Dromio nodded and said, "I, too, have had a strange evening. While you were upstairs, the scullery maid approached me and claimed to be my wife." Antipholus was shocked. "You married?" Dromio scratched his chin and replied, "It would appear that I am now married to a woman named Nell, sir." Antipholus slapped Dromio's shoulder and said, "Congratulations! How does she look?" Dromio shook his head. "Hardly," he replied. "What do you mean?" inquired Antipholus. "I mean, she's hard to look at," answered Dromio. Antipholus chuckled. After a pause, he said, "I want to leave this bizarre city as soon as possible, go to the docks, and buy tickets for the next ship out of here." Dromio left, and Antipholus sat in the living room near the front door to await his return. Not long after Dromio left, there was a knock at the door. "That was quick," thought Antipholus. But when he opened the door, it wasn't Dromio. It was an older gentleman with dirty hands. "Here's the gold chain you ordered," said the man as he handed a piece of jewelry to Antipholus. He did not know this, but the man's name was Angelo the goldsmith. He had been hired by his twin to make a fancy gold chain for Adriana. Antipholus took the chain and stared blankly at the man. The man stood there, waiting. Antipholus finally asked, "Is there something I can do for you?" The man held out his open palm and said, "The money, if you please." "Excuse me?" replied Antipholus. "The money for the chain, sir," explained the man. Antipholus smiled nervously and said, "I'm a little short on cash right now. Why don't you come back later?" The man frowned and left. Meanwhile, Dromio was at the docks arranging passage on a ship. On his way back to the house, he saw what looked like Antipholus being arrested by the police. Of course, it was not Antipholus, but his twin. "Go tell Adriana and get some money for bail," he commanded Dromio. Dromio scratched his chin and said, "What on earth is going on?" Antipholus's twin strained against the grip of the police and said, "That damned fool Angelo thinks I cheated him. Tell Adriana to prepare enough money for both the bail and to pay off Angelo. 300 gold coins should do it." Dromio rushed to Adriana's house, where he found the lady of the house and her sister sitting in the living room. "Your husband's been arrested and needs money for bail," announced Dromio breathlessly. All three rushed out the door toward the police station. Antipholus, the one from Syracuse, was in the bathroom at the time, so heard none of this. Finding the house now completely empty, Antipholus decided to go to the docks to find Dromio. He instead found Dromio's twin. "Have you booked passage yet?" he asked. Dromio's twin scratched his head and asked, "Passage to where?" Antipholus threw up his arms and shouted, "Anywhere but here! This town is bewitched!" Dromio's twin stood silently for a few seconds before saying, "I heard from Angelo that you were arrested. Is that true, sir?" Antipholus grew irate and yelled, "Not this again! I don't want to hear any more of your silly jests." But Dromio's twin insisted that he must have escaped from jail. "I'll prove it to you," said the exasperated Antipholus. "We'll go to the police station together and ask the sheriff." When the pair arrived at the police station, they were met with a huge surprise. Currently at the station were Antipholus's twin, Dromio, Adriana, and Adriana's sister. They all stood there silently for a while, mouths open and fingers pointing at one another. Just then, another shocking surprise arrived. Out of a back room came Aegeon and the Duke of Ephesus. "Sons!" cried Aegeon. Aegeon had arrived in Ephesus just before his son, and had been arrested. He pleaded his case to the Duke of Ephesus and asked for a pardon, which the Duke granted. They were now both leaving the jail together when they stumbled upon the two Antipholi, the two Dromios, and the two women. After hugging his sons, Aegeon explained everything. They all had a good laugh. The twin Antipholus paid his bail and paid off Angelo. Adriana was reconciled with her husband, and the two Dromios hugged, declaring eternal brotherhood. Finally, they all went to the Duke's house for a late-night snack. The questions. Number 1. How did the twins get separated? A. They were separated by a storm at sea. B. They were separated by a civil war. C. They were adopted by different people. D. They were separated by a ferry. The answer is A. They were separated by a storm at sea. Question 2. Who was Adriana? A. Dromio's wife. B. Antipholus' wife. C. Antipholus' twin's wife. D. Aegon's sister. The answer is C. Antipholus' twin's wife. Question 3. Why was Antipholus' twin arrested? A. He stole a pig. B. He tried to break into someone's house. C. He ran a red light. D. He didn't pay his bill. The answer is D. He didn't pay his bill. Question 4. Who appeared at the end along with the Duke of Ephesus? A. Adriana. B. Aegon. C. Dromio. D. Emilia. The answer is B. Aegon.